Welcome to my new shop. Yeah, there is quite a bit of construction going on at the moment, but I rented this place together with two other guys you maybe know, Stefan and Robin. And together we'll turn this place into a big, beautiful workshop for all of us to bring you more content. The decision of getting a bigger space for me was kind of inevitable. I ran out of space a long time ago and right now spend about a third of my time moving stuff around to get my projects done. It's ridiculous and has to stop. It's kind of a similar deal for the other two guys, but now with this place here, this will come to an end. And I try to cover as much of the construction as possible and to move into this shop here. I think let me just show you around and we'll see what's going on at the moment. What's already been done is the construction of a wall, because right here you could go into two other shops. This is a bigger building and two other businesses will move into these shops. Ours will end right here with this door probably being closed all the time. Then right here, this wall will be removed and a rolling gate will be installed. They already started on that. We'll also get a new entrance door. And here you can already see the wiring getting redone. This has to be done because previously this whole space with the other shops was owned by one company, and now the electrical wiring and stuff has to accommodate 3 different businesses. So yeah, it has to be redone completely. But this is all done by our landlord. So let's take a look at what else this space will offer. Here we will construct an office for all 3 of us. If we then move into the office, there's another room that will be our kitchen and kind of a space that's quiet to take a break in. Then if we move along here, we have our bathrooms and kind of another room that at the moment was kind of a kitchen, but we will get rid of this and do something else with this room. That's not decided yet. And down here we also have a basement. Unfortunately, there's no light working at the moment, but this is a huge storage space. I don't know how much you can see, probably nothing, but yeah, just lots and lots of storage space. What we'll do ourselves is dividing this whole shop space into 4 different smaller spaces, so 1 for each of us obviously, and then 1 shared space. But until this wall is gone and the rolling gate is installed, we can't really bring in materials to do that. The first thing we want to build is a wall that will separate the office space from the workshop space, because this being an office, it will obviously stay cleaner than the workshop, and cutting off that space from the heavy construction going on there is probably a good idea.
The first thing I made is a rough 3D model of the whole space so we could better visualize and plan what we want to build and where stuff is. And what you're going to start with is building this wall to separate the office from the rest. That began with a bit of deconstruction because there were some tiles that we needed to cut to the shape of the wall so it can be bolted to the concrete underneath. My brother-in-law and I positioned a laser at the exact position and then marked the shape of the tiles directly onto them with a Sharpie. He did the cutting, I was on vacuum duty. And then came the fun part, with me being very helpful. In my defense, I was still sick while we were doing that, and we only had 1 machine. I couldn't do anything else. There was also an unpleasant surprise underneath the tiles, which were other tiles, which we had to cut again quite a bit deeper and, yeah, a little painful, but okay. Then there was one great opportunity that I had to use. Then a little bit of cleanup of all the debris we created before we continued with leveling out the floor. The result was a nice and crisp edge of the tiles and a prepared floor. The last step here then was to fill all the little holes and the bigger holes from the tiles we had to remove with some leveling compound. Unfortunately, it was extremely loud that day and I couldn't really film much. But at least it was cool to watch the big saw for a bit that cut open the wall for the rolling gate. That really is a big machine which made a lot of noise.
But then, with the leveling compound dry, we could begin building the office wall with an angled corner, door and window cutout. We ordered material for all walls we are going to build at once and got a big delivery right to the front door. Unfortunately, the rolling gate was still under construction at that time and we had to bring in every piece one by one. 350 meters of 60 by 80 millimeter construction lumber, 100 sheets of 18mm OSB and about 100 square meters of insulation. That was a workout. I made a drawing with all necessary dimensions and we could begin positioning the crosshair laser to mark all locations on the floor, wall and ceiling. And if you wonder what's going on in the background, that's just Stefan drilling into the lock, because we didn't got any keys to change that. And here's the cross section of the wall. Construction lumber, OSB and drywall to end up flush on the outside. Now let's cut some lumber. And here I already screwed up the length. At least the piece just still fits and nobody will ever see it. But please don't tell anybody. On the long part, I already marked the location of the door and partially cut through it. That will make sense later. For bolting the pieces to the floor, we pre-drilled the holes and put on some sealing tape. But then bolting to the floor turned out to be a nightmare. The plan was to just drill a hole and then use these special bolts that need no anchor directly in concrete. But they just didn't grip or we didn't have enough torque, and then with enough torque they eventually broke. No idea what we did wrong, because these bolts were sold for concrete with the matching drill bit. It was really strange. We then switched to these bolts with anchors and they worked great. Just drilling the hole, hammering it through the wood into the concrete and tightening it with some of the anchor remaining in the wood. That was super easy. But just getting these first pieces into the floor took 4 hours, with all the bolt struggle, buying new ones and other hiccups. At least during that time we could drill a hole into the basement to bring power and networking cables into the wall. But also that didn't went quite smoothly. We hit steel that kept a bit stuck for a while. But we got it back. Mounting to the ceiling then was much simpler, except there was a lighting panel in the way that needed to go as well. The wall-mounted studs were also simpler, using the same bolts and anchors as for the bottom. Then we could mark and measure all wall studs and cut them to length. Quick cake break and then mounting them one by one. Pretty simple actually, with 2 angle screws on top and bottom. From there, it was just a lot of repetitive work while making sure the cutouts for the window and door were sized correctly.
With that done, it was just a matter of adding the remaining short studs in between, and it's pretty cool how every piece adds a little bit of detail, making the wall look more and more finished.
The last step is to remove the part on the bottom for the door. With the cuts from before, there's no risk of cutting into the concrete and saving the blade. This also ensured that the bottom pieces line up perfectly, because mounting a long straight piece to concrete and then removing a section, everything will still be aligned perfectly. But first mounting one piece and then trying to align the second one perfectly to the rest is very hard when mounting to concrete. And that's the framing work done with the first sheets of OSB already mounted, which is the next job. Screwing OSB to the entire inside wall. For the most part, it's cutting big sheets to dimension, but there are also some places where a full sheet fits exactly. That's also how we chose our material dimensions. With the big 1.25 meter wide OSB panels and the 6 cm thick construction lumber at that spacing, you can buy insulation that fits this spacing perfectly. And in many cases, you don't even have to cut it. Very cool time saver. We also didn't care about the window cutout, since it was much easier to just mount the full sheet and use the window cutout itself to guide the jigsaw for cutting the opening. And we did exactly the same for the door cutout. With most of the material gone there, I trimmed the cutout closer to the framing, since I could now see what I was doing. And the last bit of material I then flush trimmed with a router. What a dusty mess! Next time I will definitely wear my full face mask. I was covered. Shirt, face, even between my ass cheeks. I was still finding wood shavings under my shirt in the evening. At least the result was worth it. But that was the cool and easy part. Now it was time to get on the floor and cut sheets to size. I picked up some styrofoam to cut into, so I'm not worrying about cutting into the floor. And Robin could then screw them to the wall. Then the upper part at the ceiling. We didn't want to remove the entire old ceiling, since there was insulation underneath as well, and only did that inside the office. One by one, I cut through the slats with a vibrating saw and ripped them off. Fortunately, the insulation stayed up. And with the slats gone, we could mount the OSB all the way up and close the gaps between the old ceiling and the construction lumber. Quite uneventful, but the difference when everything is mounted is huge. Starting to look like a wall. And Stefan is already starting with the drywall. But it was already late that day, so Robin and I finished that job the next day. And like the OSB, I then also flush trimmed the drywall to the window and door cutout.
There was also the perfect coincidence that we could mount a drywall sheet below the window, cut it flush, and the remaining sheet was the perfect size on top. It's the little things that turn a good day into a great day.
As you can see, we also put drywall against the ceiling to keep that insulation intact, but that was just painful. Working 3 meters up, every piece custom and limited options to put screws. So glad that's over. And the wall one step closer to being finished. Time for a well-deserved break for Robin and me. That's also a very good time to tell you who Robin is. And conveniently, he's already wearing a microphone.
Hi, my name is Robin and I will be one of the 3 guys moving into this brand new shop here. And I'm super glad that I found those 2 nerds because I think I'm kind of the same category.
He means us 2 nerds.
Unlike Marius, I'm a little bit less in the heavy-duty metal and woodworking, style. I'm more the software and electronics guy, or overall product design fan, I would say. The last few years, I was occupied by making my very first commercial product, which is the Pixel Pump, and that's a small desktop vacuum pump for PCB assembly, which bridges the gap between having tweezers and a full-blown pick-and-place machine. And it combined all those things. I did the product design, software design, electronics, mechanical design, and all that, and I had a ton of fun. And before that project, I had a YouTube channel, or I still have, but I didn't make any videos in the last few years, and I'm very happy to have a brand new studio back there, which will allow me to make videos again. And I'm sure we will have a great time here because those 2 guys are really cool and I love working with them already. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter and you'll find the links down in the video description.
I hope this can boost his Pixel Pump sales, but not too much. We need his time to finish the renovation. And who is Stefan? Hey Stefan, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Stefan and many know me under the Guten Tag everybody, I'm Stefan. I have a channel called CNC Kitchen. I do tons of 3D printing stuff. If you want to know more about functional 3D printing, then check out my channel. I'm honestly really happy to be right here because I'm now starting to do this full time, and even though I still had a studio before, I would have turned crazy filming stuff and doing projects just by myself. I'm really looking forward to be here to have 2 other guys to toss around ideas and not turn crazy at some point. And one of the things I really want to have now is a functional studio.
But before the studio comes finishing the office wall, which continues with some electrical work. So placing outlets, that started out wonderful with the wrong size hole saw. Great. That meant an early lunch break and hardware store trip. At least, this kind of thing only happened once. Yeah, just once. But this one is for the light switch. All the other outlets in the office we placed at a standard height 30 centimeters off the floor, and one on top for networking stuff and lighting. The wiring will come together in this box, and right after finishing the cutout, we replaced it with a bigger one. Very good decision. Key takeaway from any electrical installation: use a bigger box. As I showed you in part 2 of this series, the whole power supply comes through a hole in the basement. But we quickly realized that one hole isn't enough. Now it should be fine. We then fitted all the cables through the studs and installed the empty outlet boxes and made photos of everything to know where not to drill or screw later. We also only ran cables horizontally or vertically and never diagonal. Here you can now see the power and networking cable going into the basement. And then we could start with the installation, where we bought Naturheld Flex 50 wood fiber insulation. And this stuff is very cool to work with. It's quite heavy, so excellent for noise dampening, not harmful and very stable in itself. As I mentioned previously, the stud thickness, OSB width and insulation width match up. So in many cases we didn't even have to cut it and could just push it in. Only cutting it is a bit unpleasant. A regular insulation knife works okay-ish, but tears out the surfaces quite a bit. Cutouts for outlets and such worked also great with just a knife, and you can easily rip out chunks for that. But for just cutting, we also tried the circular saw. Very effective actually. Only problem is that it didn't cut deep enough and we had to cut from both sides. The whole job was a continuous learning process, and a few weeks later we got a much better tool. The best would be of course a bandsaw, but my one wasn't there yet, so we just did the best with what we got, and that was really not too bad. So next is closing the outside with OSB. To leave room for expansion, we put down some highly professional spacers, little pieces of tile, about 8 mm thick. And we used that tile spacing at many more occasions. Whenever we needed a spacing, yeah, let's just go with the tiles. Just a very convenient free spacer. Mounting the OSB then was straightforward, and with a small practice from the inside wall, we were faster already. At the window and door cutout, we also again screwed just over it and cut it flush afterwards with a jigsaw and then a flush trim router bit. Then cutting the last pieces on top to size and the OSB is done.
Hold on.
Remember that we routed the cables at a 30 cm height, so where should you avoid to put screws? Yeah, that's me screwing right there. It was right about here. At least we caught it, opened the wall back up to check, and we missed it by just about a millimeter. Phew! Thank God we learned from this mistake, and this didn't happen at any other wall. Anyways, next comes the drywall, but that will be a topic of the next. Just kidding, we're doing that now. First, the easy full sheets at an offset to each other, and then all the rest cut to size. And here's how we did that. Marking the length from both sides, aligning a straight edge, and score the surface with a knife. Then breaking it and cutting through the back layer. Now straightening the cut surface, adding a chamfer with a knife and hoping it fits. Jackpot for this one.
Vergiss die Maßfliese nicht.
All in all, easy going, but if you have any tips on going faster, let us know. We would love to learn from your experience. We also flush trimmed the drywall, maybe unnecessary in hindsight, but it definitely was satisfying to look at, and the window fit was actually pretty tight. Last step before fill and plaster was fitting the outlets on the outside, and fishing for the cables we left there.
Ja, warte. Okay. Okay, wie viel haben wir noch? Du hast schon noch, oder? Ja. Das reicht auch schon. Das reicht schon. Schön. Ja. Okay.
Very happy with how everything has turned out so far. The plastering work we had then done professionally, because none of us had experience and we wanted that to look good, which it does. One evening I came in with my dad to install a window. We got that window for free, but had to pretty it up a bit and remove this part. That was a real workout. 5 minutes of continuous hammering is exhausting. Then to install a frame, we first had to remove the glass, which on this kind of window can be done by just wedging out the inner frame. Then we cleaned off the plaster from the edge a bit and prepared some spacers. Because the plan was to wedge the frame in the opening with spacers and screw it down from the inside. Quite possibly not the best way of doing that, but it's an indoor window, we had the screws, and that was quick. Without the glass, we could paint the wall the next day, and with the paint dry, I cleaned the glass and put it back in. But now there was still this gap between the window frame and the wall, so we removed it again to install sealing tape all around. Very good decision, that did a lot for noise dampening. And finally, we got the door installed by a professional, and that is the office wall complete. So with the office and lounge room now separate from the outside, it's now time to work on the inside, starting with some very necessary wallpaper work. Well, that's actually the old kitchen and bathroom, but still necessary, and Stefan did a pretty good job there. And it's amazing how much different the room feels with just a new wallpaper. But one corner in the actual lounge room also needed new wallpaper, and while preparing it, I came across the one thing we all love: rusty slotted screws. Just why? But then Stefan could go to work. Much better as well, and we can move on with painter's tape. And for the paint in this room, we went with a light gray, so mixing just a little bit of a dark, almost black color into a bucket with white.
Stopp! Es soll nur leicht grau werden. This single bucket was more than enough for 2 coats on a whole waltz, and painting was a nice family activity, cause I did that together with my sister, brother-in-law and my 2 nieces. And of course, when there's a camera, shenanigans will happen. But besides that, it turned out pretty well and we're all happy with the result.
The next day then, I could prepare the corner with a new wallpaper, because we will turn that into a small kitchen and it's gonna be a dark gray. Weird problem there, 3 different brands of painter's tape and nothing wanted to stick. So frustrating. The 4th attempt then kind of worked and was just sticky enough to paint over. And I first painted over with the light gray again to backfill the tape and get sharp edges. Let's see if that worked.
Oh yeah, pretty nice.
Alright, now the office and the ceiling. We discussed a few ideas, but in general wanted an interesting looking ceiling with wood that's not too expensive. Considering the amount of time spent in the office, we wanted to do a good job there, and the wood we had a lot of is OSB. So we settled with suspended OSB panels with a recessed spotlight in each for lighting and a dark color as background. I made a rough model to visualize and adjust dimensions, but then we went to work with our most favorite work of all time, painter's tape.
Because painting the ceiling dark is the first thing that needs to happen. Not that exciting to be fair, but it needs to happen to achieve the look we want.
We put a laser up high because part of the wall should also be dark. And I again painted white over the tape for the sharp edges, and this will also make painting the walls afterwards easier. I guess you know what's coming now. Dark paint to the ceiling.
and the ceiling is dark, with me finishing the last details here. It looks so easy, but Robin and I had very sore muscles the next day. At least we were rewarded with this. You can also see that we already painted quite a bit of white under the tape, and that's so we didn't need to be as careful with the remaining white walls. And it's always amazing what a difference freshly painted white walls make. Everything feels bright and new and bigger. With the painting done, we could make the OSB panels. And a size that worked well with our material dimensions was 1 by 1 meter. Because with a full sheet being 1.25 by 2.5 meters big, we could cut 2 panels from one sheet. The long offcut was useful later for building the shop walls, and the small offcut also had a use. And so we went to work with the track saw on some styrofoam. First the long strip, then a panel from each side, and repeat. Like this we could mark everything up front on the pallet, align the saw track, and cut. After like 4 sheets, we worked together like a good team, and the 28 panels were done in less than 2 hours. Next question was how to suspend and mount the panels to the ceiling. With over 10 kilos per panel, it had to be solid. And suitable material we already had was our construction lumber from the walls. And so we went with 2 thicknesses as distance and made the simple construction. 3 pieces screwed together with 1 mounting screw each. Simple, solid, and room for cable management. This thickness is also what we used for the dark paint on the wall. Those suspension pieces only needed to be mounted relatively precisely at the right location on the ceiling. So for that I made a drawing with all necessary dimensions, set up a crossline laser parallel to the wall. Well, as parallel as possible, because no walls ever are truly straight and square. And marked all the drill locations for the suspending construction. It did help a lot to use the same reference for each measurement. As you can see on the drawing, it's this corner, or rather these 2 walls in the office. And then a distance laser while I'm on the ladder. Then 1 hole, and impact dowel for each. Time for production, making all the suspending construction. And marking, drilling, and mounting everything to the ceiling. Once that was done, it got more and more clear that this ceiling is more effort than we anticipated. Because next we had to paint the construction lumber dark as well, because you can see it from some angles. So while I was busy painting, Robin could mount the cable channels for the lights. Every panel got a junction box for the light and also normal power. More on that later. The white cable supplies power to the junction, and then the next panel, the black cable, is for the spotlight. Once all that was done, we could tidy the office up and bring in the first panel. It got a centered hole for the spotlight, and we also marked the mounting screw locations. Now I set up the crossline laser again to the spacing of the first panel. And seriously, without that laser, we wouldn't have done this ceiling. Robin could hold it up and thread in the light cable. I clamped it lightly in place, and we could hammer it into position. Looking pretty good so far. For the mounting screws we made a complex jig. A stick for a mark. And screwed it down, up. 1 up, 17 to go. For the second panel, we didn't move the laser and only used one laser line and a distance block, because setting up the laser takes time. So our whole strategy was to move the laser as little as possible, mount the 3 corner panels, and then move the laser to the next corner for those 3 panels. We had marks on the wall to get the laser at the same position again, and a classic road sign on the opposite side. Pretty useful actually, since it's big and very reflective, so easy to see when the laser touches the edge. Robin and I also started playing a game. Guess the panel center for the hole. This is him. This is me. The target is 50 centimeters from each side. I'm basically spot on in this direction, but way off in this direction. In total, Robin is closer to the actual center. But we got better and better with each panel. From there, it was very repetitive. And for the 4 center panels, we didn't need the laser anymore and could rely just on the distance blocks. The 2 panels in the back were then again mounted with the help of the laser. But to get the diagonal nicely accurate, we used a nicely sketchy setup. Saw track clamped to the panels. I got covered in dust, but it worked beautifully. We are very happy with the result. Everything is nice and accurate, a comfy feeling for the office, exactly what we wanted. But now an important question. Is there a triangle missing? Leave your opinion in the comments. Installing the lights now was rather simple. I mean, see for yourself. Just repeating it 17 more times. Lights on. We went with 10 watts per bulb at 4000 Kelvin temperature. It's all evenly bright without a single dark spot. Perfect for the office. Now what I said about the power cable. We ran a 3-phase cable from the light switch up the wall to the ceiling, but not hooked up to 3-phase power. Because at first we thought about having a double light switch and divide the lighting into 2 groups, which we didn't end up doing. But the 3rd phase in the cable, hooked up to single-phase power, is now an easy option to install an outlet on every panel. Say we want to install a projector here against this wall or a fan here. The OSB is an easy mounting option and an outlet can be installed at every panel with little effort. For example, one of our Wi-Fi hotspots is hidden on a panel without any wire mess. Hopefully it's future-proofed enough, because installing this whole ceiling with paint and everything took us about 1.5 weeks. We now can say it was worth it, but then again we did the same thing again in the launch room. Really unimaginable without the cross-lined laser. But also there, worth it. Now it's time to finish the 2 rooms by installing the floor and the kitchen. Our decision was carpet with laminate underneath, which seems pretty weird, but let me explain. The bare concrete was pretty level and clean to begin with, except for a few places where we cut the tiles at the beginning and where a few floor outlets were installed. And leveling the entire area would have been pretty expensive, with the leveling compound being 25 euros per square meter. The whole area being 60 square meters, that's 1,500 bucks just for leveling, and without even knowing how thick the layer needs to be. But the main reason was heat insulation, because the bare concrete with basement underneath is cold. With laminate, we could put a 5mm layer of insulation underneath, which is a little bit of heat insulation and levels out the remaining spots good enough. Insulation and laminate together was less than 10 euros per square meter and about 12mm thick, which we also needed to get to the tile level again. So perfect for our situation, and so we went shopping. Floor and food.
This was actually one of the first decisions and purchases. As you can see from the construction site, there was nothing done yet. No walls built, everything is a mess, Just us and our material.
Impressive to see the weight of the whole flooring. Well, and then we just started. It's a simple, pretty common interlocking click system. Just the beginning is a bit painful when it's still too light and shifts all the time.
Grad rein, runter, hinlaufen, oder?
So we put the first two lengths together, kind of piece by piece, while figuring out a strategy for the next section. Eventually, we got the first bit in with 5 to 10 millimeters gap to the wall. From there, we could pre-assemble the next section, cut some of the weird shaped pieces and click it in. Closing the gaps all the way then worked great with a small offcut and a hammer. Yep, that camera is recording. Here another section in detail. Assembling the boards, marking the length of the last board, and cut it with a jigsaw. I used a metal cutting blade because it leaves no tear out behind. And the offcut from cutting to length is the beginning of the next section, which ensures the seams to never align and be spread randomly. That's the process. In the doorframe, we left a gap to the office floor because the two rooms might have different temperatures and humidities and thus will expand differently. Once the launch room was done, we did the same again in the office. Basically all the same, but with a great view from the ceiling. The last bit is again painful, because there you have to cut every piece to width and make weird cutouts everywhere. At least we now had enough experience already to get it on the first try.
Ah, der Kamera ist früher eingeschaltet, glaube ich.
Das war wohl nichts.
Cut that out. No. Like I said, first try. And done.
Sehr gut.
While it's very cheap flooring, it turned out pretty nice. But don't get used to it, because next Stefan and Robin installed the carpet. But who didn't record anything of that?
We didn't.
So who's disappointed that they couldn't see the process?
All of the viewers.
Well, we have 3 photos. But they did an excellent job. We used double-sided tape and it sticks perfectly fine. Really nice and incredible how much it reduced the echo. Stefan then did all the trim work. And I installed the transition profiles in the doors.
Nice.
With the laminate and carpet, we are now at the same level with the tiles, so there's no step. There's also one between the office and the launch room. And a third in the launch room for the kitchen area. There's a little bit of a height difference, but there are also profiles for that case. We got tiles installed at the kitchen area, and the kitchen itself is relatively new, but used and was free. Came with a working stove and fridge, and we bought a new dishwasher, sink, and countertop. Just getting water and power to there was a bit of work. The water part was done together with the new toilets, because the kitchen is directly behind this wall. For the power, I had to drill 2 holes to the basement. First one done and inspected.
Da kommt ja die halbe Decke mit.
And damn, did the second one turn out nice and parallel to the first one. Kind of proud of myself here.
Up there now go 4 cables, 1 3-phase and 3 single-phase. And they come together here in this sub-distribution box with a fuse for each and its own RCD. The 3-phase supplies the stove, which is totally normal in Germany. The first single-phase is for warm water, because there we use an instantaneous water heater, and that draws 3.5 kilowatts by itself, so it needs a whole single phase. The second one is this one, supplying the dishwasher, and the third one is for these 3 outlets, coffee maker, finally. It's obviously not 100% finished, but a nicely functional kitchen. We of course also already got a table to sit at and the classic fruit basket.
The last job before calling these rooms finished is shortening the door to accommodate the added floor thickness.
Damn, so close.
Ja.
Wow, a lot of work went into these 2 rooms, but we made ourselves a nice little space that we like to work in.
Here we have Robin's desk and setup in the office. This is Stefan's. And here's mine. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's temporary.